Remember to subscribe for daily top Reddit stories. Okay, story time. Serious, people who work in Hollywood. What's the most ducked up thing you've witnessed in the business? That parents are willing and actively trying to pimp out their kids for roles on the next hit children's show. Roles for the kids, not the parents, just to be clear. Most people in the business are conceited bignicks. I interned on a crappy, short-lived reality show for MTV. The producers were the biggest assholes who thought they were the sheep because they had been handpicked for this job. They had very short resumes and treated everyone above them like gods and everyone below them like slaves. One spilled her entire drink on my personal laptop when I was out of the room. When I returned and saw it sitting in a puddle, she hadn't even attempted to clean it up. She said, "Yeah, that was me. You shouldn't leave your computer on the desk." They also regularly popped pills, for which they didn't have a prescription, openly. Used to be an on-set grunt on Supernatural. One of the two main actors was kind of a giant Dutch bag on set. I'm not a fan of Jared Padalecki. I've got a few stories of that guy treating the grunts like shit. But here's one nugget that always makes me smile. On Jared Padalecki's IMDb it says while filming season 2, Jared Padalecki, Sam Winchester, broke his wrist after performing one of the stunts on the show. The truth is they got into a bar fight the night before filming and Jared broke his wrist. That guy had a real chip on his shoulder and fancied himself some kind of fighter bro. The rumor is they started it and Jared ended up getting hurt. They had to write it into the show, so if you're a fan. The reason Sam Winchester had a cast on in season 2, starting in episode 4, was because he got in a bar fight and lost. Edit. Did some more googling and other sources say he broke his wrist from overtraining. What a tool. Having a producer call me specifically because he had many glowing recommendations for me and sang my praises. Then asked my daily rate for a feature. Then after a big sigh from him and an awkward silence he asked if I could work for 10 days for $25 a day. After another longer awkward silence from me waiting to see if it was a joke I asked him if he was serious. He said yes. I said I wouldn't work for that little because it's the equivalent of $2 an hour for highly skilled labor. He told me I didn't know what I was missing and that he would give out terrible recommendations to others about me because I turned him down. But on a more serious note, there's been some horrendous deaths on set and after rap due to lack of safety and improper training, cutting corners, or sneaking things. Sarah Jones was the most recent large example, but there's been too many vehicle rollovers due to crew members falling asleep after ridiculous hours. Someone being electrocuted on a condor lift when they hit electrical wires because they weren't trained nor legally allowed to be in the lift. Just crazy stuff. Oh. Also had an actor lift his oversized shirt over his head in front of me and forget he didn't have any clothing on underneath. I understood why the ladies talked about him all the time after that. I was a lowly intern for a bigger production company during film school. We were doing a pitch day where writers and other producer wannabes came in to pitch their ideas. We, 6 of us, sat at a long table while the potential filmmaker told us their idea hoping for funding. Before we started the EP, said if you hear me say the word pass in any context that's code for stop taking notes and have 0 follow-up questions so we can get the duds sorted out quickly. People were coming in and pitching and a few minutes into their stories he would say, "Pass me a pen or pass trammy for lunch okay with everyone." He was having fun coming up with ways to interrupt the pitches with his hidden code word. Well, the worst one was a guy from Minnesota who had this kids movie idea that a lot of people back home loved. It got some attention and the right people agreed to set up this pitch meeting for him. The guy was written up in his town paper. Local boy goes to Hollywood. They named a drink after him in this small town. The town got together to raise money for his trip out to big ol' Hollywood. Hero worship to the hilt. Anyhow, he walks in, sets up an eel and the EP immediately says, "Are you coming from Pasadena?" Done. Over. Pens down. All he'd said was his name and "It's a pleasure to be here," and he got passed. I felt bad for everyone that day, but I felt especially bad for him. He went on to pitch his entire story and his hometown hero personal story, and all the EP he was doing was drawing geometric shapes on his notepad. I've shared this story here before under a throwaway, but I guess I can share it under another throwaway again. Throwaways because although I don't mind it as much now, it is not something I would admit to in real life. Honestly, you would be surprised how many people in the industry use Reddit. Anyways, a few years ago, I used to weigh about 340 pounds. I am 6 feet 4, numbers slightly altered. So I guess I gave off what people in the film industry might call a big guy persona. You know, the guy who only exists to provide some form of backup or comedic relief. The roles involved exactly what you might think it would be. Eating, and more eating. Pretty much every single scene I was involved in, I was essentially supposed to be the butt of fat jokes, a slobbering mess of a man. When you're on set in that sort of situation, what you realize is that the difference between your life and a movie isn't too big. Maybe other than the fact that people express their opinions out loud in a movie, and in real life, they might keep those opinions to themselves or talk behind your back. In all honesty, it was a struggle every day, because on screen, I would have this couldn't care less persona. But I felt the words and I knew the harsh reality. After going through this experience, I've realized that it is pretty much a fact that people will judge you on your appearance, maybe consciously or subconsciously, but they will judge you, even if well-meaning people have convinced you otherwise earlier in your life. Even if you're a great person on the inside, your appearance is you being presented to the world, and first impressions count a lot. Any fame I had was not the result of my talent but rather my physique and how well I could handle being insulted. People weren't laughing with me, they were laughing at me. I was the source of the comedy. Hollywood, and I'd say the entire movie industry in general, is a very, very judgmental place where unless you conform to certain views or characteristics, you have no place or significance of existing into people who are already there. Ultimately though, the same thing worked as a sort of motivating factor. I knew that I couldn't go along like this, so I had to change. Started working out, went on a very drastic diet, and was down to 200 pounds by the end of the next year. The absolute best thing about the change, finally feeling wanted, feeling that people actually like being near you and want to work with you. One time I had an audition and I had a zit on the side of my nose and the casting director just said come back when you get a bar of soap. Other than that, stage moms. Edit. Just remembered another one. Filmed an episode of a show about a comedy sketch show that takes place at 30 Rockefeller Center. We were shooting outside on the street, and Alec Baldwin was screaming at tourists for taking photos and ruining the show. We were filming outside at noon in one of the most touristy sections of the city. The word art was mentioned in the diatribe. The eye contact among everyone said you what? I worked on a show recently where the art director was a supreme bigwig. We had a midget on set and he had to go in a cage. The midget went in the cage. Already every human being with a soul on set is uncomfortable and the AD says okay kneel down. Well, the poor guy didn't have knees. So he said I don't have knees. I can't kneel. This confused the AD. He asked again. To the further embarrassment of every person there, the midget showed him his legs. They tried him sitting on his butt but his legs stuck out of the cage comically and that wasn't the look they were going for. They were looking at putting a hole in the bottom of the cage to fake it. Finally, and I wasn't there by this point. It was too much and I wasn't needed for that problem. The AD said I just need you to kneel down. Angry pause. I physically cannot kneel down. I don't bend there. AD. Not my problem. And he walked off set. I wasn't around to see what happened after or if they reshot or whatever, but I literally can't even. Only one person has named a celebrity so I'll spill some juice. Mira Sorvino is the one of the worst actresses I have ever worked with. She threatened to walk off the set one day. You were not allowed to be in her eye line when we were shooting, or look at her. She could not remember her lines and she blamed it on 100 things. She made the DP change his lens a few times and made him raise his camera more than once because she did not want to be shot from below her eye line. She didn't think it was flattering. She made producers order her very high-end makeup because she didn't like what the makeup artist was using. She had to check herself in the mirror before every take. Everyone on set could not stand her but because she had won an Oscar she thought she was queen of the world. 2. Worked with Clarence Williams. 3. Mod Squad TV show. He threw a bottle of water at my head in front of 20 plus people and no one said anything. I was replaceable, he however was not. 3. Adam Baldwin showed up to film an interview totally drunk. He brought a 6-pack with him, finished it and continued to finish off everything in the minibar at the hotel. Also not very nice. Sorry Firefly fans. I work as a post coordinator on a network TV show. There is one producer we have that doesn't really do much. He just got the title and passed the work on to everyone else. He only shows up to set whenever casting calls involve models or hot women, and he creeps on them hard. I see it often because the casting office isn't far from the post offices, and it annoys the piss out of us cause we need his signature for a lot of stuff and it's impossible to get a hold of him sometimes. Anyways, one time a casting day happens and I remember a few of the women he was talking to. That night I had to take some paperwork to get signed to the producer's house at night. He has this house in a secluded part of the Hollywood Hills. I get up and ring the door, and lo and behold, he opens it and behind him are 4 women from that casting session, all in their underwear, sugar powder on the table, and the producer is coked out of his mind. He invites me in and I decline, but it eventually devolves into saying he won't sign until I come in. I sit away from everyone and keep super quiet as they do blow and drink, and decline all the offers. Eventually he went away with 2 of the girls to another room, 6, of course, and told me he'd sign when he came back. I awkwardly wait for about 30 minutes until the girls come out and leave, clearly upset and pissed. I go in and find him passed out and vomit on his bed. I told the other 2 girls and they left along. I put him into a position where he wouldn't choke on his vomit and left, forged the signature. The next day he came to apologize to me and asked if I told the EPs or showrunners. I said no and noticed my check the next week had a crap ton of overtime I didn't work. We haven't spoken about it since. I was a costume designer back in the day, late 90s early 2000, and I was working on a movie with Jennifer Esposito. The 3 male producers called me into their office and asked me if she had a fat ass. I was a bit confused and asked why they wanted to know. They said, and I swear to God this is true, Jennifer Lopez has a big ass so we want to know if this Jennifer also has a fat ass. Double quote. I assured them she was thin and beautiful, no fat ass. As a side note, I also worked with Mandy Bentley who was a fairly famous Playboy twin. Bentley twins. At the time, she was literally a walking Holocaust victim with tits. Capital I. I'm telling you I have never seen someone so thin before in my life. It was truly disgusting. And not a single person gave a shit, not the director, producer, her manager and agent, ETA. My point in describing Ms. Bentley's body as disgusting was to make sure the reader understood just how grossly underweight she was. Obviously Ms. Bentley needed help, anyone with a pair of eyes could see that. But nobody cared enough about her to get her help. She was one of the saddest people I ever met in the industry because there was just nothing there, a shell of a woman. Honestly, I hope she is doing better and has found some happiness, because at that time there was just emptiness in her eyes. Something I will never forget. A very well-known pop star's uncle offering information on said pop star for cash. Everything from baby pictures and videos, to her whereabouts. You name it, it all had a price. This happens more than you realize. I worked on some film sets in the Northeast when I was younger, but decided not to go into film for various reasons. The most ducked up thing I've been a part of was filming at an abandoned mental hospital that was vacated in the 80s, which meant it was full of asbestos and lead paint dust. There were 2 respirator masks on the whole set and the rest of the people were expected to make do with a particle mask. No one wanted to be high maintenance, or if they did, they just quit the shoot. So we all just stupidly accepted the risk and spent a month being exposed to asbestos and extreme lead dust. Edit, yes, it was session 9. I'm a female visual effects artist working primarily in television. I've had several douchy supervisors, and some great ones. There are a lot of egos in this business and some people who think it's perfectly acceptable to be nasty and sexist. I have more than one thing. Sorry, I was once told, after working double time all weekend, mind you, that I should use more nouns when I speak. This was when my boss asked me about my progress on a shot that I was racing to finish before a deadline. When I asked to switch departments so that I could learn another discipline, I was told that the one I wanted to go to was all guys and they weren't sure how I would fit in there. I watched one supervisor throw a chair across my boss's office. The owner of a company I used to work for would bring in his herd of rescue dogs that weren't housebroken. They would pee and poop all over the floor and he wouldn't clean it up. I watched one of the dogs lift his leg and piss on my co-worker's chair. Super fun to work for an hour with a pile of diarrhea sitting next to you. They would also bite clients and I was bitten twice on the job. I was laid off so that the girl the leg artist was sleeping with could have a full-time job in the department. They tried to get me to come back 3 weeks later. No thanks. Since not a lot of people are naming names, I'll go ahead and do so. Adi Shankar. Sketchiest person I've met in this town. I know he's a hero on Reddit, but he's the craziest person I've ever worked for. In my first few years in LA, I interned a lot, including at his company. I thought it was pretty cool to learn from the producer of movies like The Grey and Dread, but what I learned pretty early on is that producer is a pretty flexible term in Hollywood. What his company does is gap financing. Let's say a movie is already packaged and ready to go, but they have $28 million of a $30 million budget. They go to a company like Adi's. He gets a loan from the bank for $2 million and slaps his name on as executive producer. No creativity, no involvement with the production. Perfectly fine business model, but the level of douchiness that came with this has been unmatched at any of my other jobs. He would parade around town acting like he was the sole creative force behind The Grey and hilling them softly. As a specific example, he likes to tell people that it was his idea to shoot Dread in 3D. He would often call interns into his office just to show them videos of some sloot he ducked the night before. I was often tasked with searching IMDb for rising actresses. He would then call them in for a general meeting where he would talk about how he was going to make them into a star, while usually not so successfully trying to trick them into sleeping with him. A year of interning there and all I learned were what rugas he liked, and how to get women to sleep with him. Not a minute of actual industry work happened at that office. Turns out the actual producers and directors of projects don't take too kindly to some guy parading around claiming responsibility for their movie. He was basically blacklisted from the industry, which is why he's making his bootleg YouTube videos. His methods haven't changed at all. We all loved the Power Rangers short. What no one knows is that it was 100% paid for with the director's own money. Over $100,000. Adi didn't spend $1 of his own money on this, or any of his other videos. He has the directors pay for them, do all the creative, then puts it up on his YouTube page and essentially takes full credit for it. Interning for him was ducked up. Cultish ego trip that has been unmatched at any of the places I've worked after, including large studios. Crew guys are the most sexually harassing methodicas you've ever seen. They prey on all the hot extras and day players with the unspoken or spoken promise of better lighting or placement closer to the principals. These grips are just old, dirty LCs trying to duck girls young enough to be their granddaughters. The crew runs the show on set. That's for sure not the director, believe me. It goes back 70 years and the sheet they pull would get them fired in any other industry. Have a street scene with 10 hookers. Guess which one is featured? Best bod with a certain casual attitude is probably best. If the principal actress is shitty to the crew and refuses the wrong advances, her lighting will be so ducking harsh or delays will duck with her momentum during shooting. Millions of ways to duck with the unwilling. Passed down from father to son for years. You want to be in the movies? How bad? Got cast in your first feature? Want to look beautiful or horrifying? Escapes me now. But I remember hearing about an old Lana Turner or maybe Faye Dunaway story where she got shitty with the crew and her lighting is so different from the other actors. It's like she's in a different film. Duck us? No. Duck you. Shoot. I gotta save the world. Thanks for listening. If I spark joy, hit me with a like and subscribe. I make new videos every day. Till then, check out another video or leave a comment. I love you. Have a great day, you smashing sexy person.